So studios, zero staff.
Zero staff.
Wow.
So people watch a video. We tell them, okay, you come in like this, you get here, the parking is there, video how to get there, video how to use the space, place the mic the right way, place yourself in the center of the table, and nothing moves, right? Like even the camera, not the camera arm, but the mic arms are specially found to work well for somebody that we don't want you to, unscrew something and things like that, and then the mic would fell down. So everything has been thought through for the automation and locked in place.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Studio Operator series. Previous ones we've recorded across the world, and this is the first one that I'm doing without Vuk, and I'm actually very proud because it's done at Podster in Singapore. And with me I have Jeremy from OnPod, and the reason why I feel this one is a special one is because the first time we met Jeremy, or we heard of Jeremy, was through the Podyx team, where Jeremy reached out, and he's not a studio owner that has one studio or no studios like some. He has 4 for now.
Yeah, for now.
And when he reached out, there was a bunch of ideas and a bunch of questions around how things are being done at Podyx, how things could be done, lots of suggestions. It was different, in my opinion, because usually is a typical story like Podster or like many other owners which were running one studio. They have specific requests. They are running traditional studios in many sense. But Jeremy conversation was different. So Jeremy, give us a short story about yourself. And I have a lot of questions about what you do and about the future of the industry. So I can't wait to dig in.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the intro. For me, my story, I come from broadcast. So a broadcaster in Canada. I worked in broadcast all my life, 7 years, which is still a long time. And then, I've done everything in the broadcast world. I was a switcher director, a camera operator, CCU operator, camera control unit, prompter, maintenance. So I went and
Cleaner.
touched I went and touched everything, right? Which is really cool. And then, I fell in as at one point I was working for museums and they cut my position, and this is where I become a freelancer, which is, to me, it's like, it was such a revelation, because I was always too scared of going freelance. So moving forward, I met this guy and he needs help with his podcast. So then I start a conventional podcast studio, meaning, you got in most case, ATEM switcher. I got an operator. I switched the show live, and then I can re-edit it really quickly through the editing software. It's a really fast-paced and really simple product, right? Then my wife at the time gets a job in immigration, and that pushes us to move in a year or so. We're moving to another country to live somewhere else. Right. So now my business is like, what am I gonna do, right? And then these guys come into to my life. Dan from Epiphan Video comes in and shows me this recorder-encoder-streamer. He's like, look at this device. You want to try it? Tell me what you think. We think that you'd be a great client for us, a great fit. Because what they do is that they make these recorder-encoder-streamer device that they put into schools, mainly. Schools and different places, but it's really great for the teacher to record the class or automate everything for the class, right? So the students can come in and, watch the class anywhere, anytime. Right after the class has been recorded, they just go online, they see the classroom, they can even choose the camera they want to watch. So that's really great. Yeah. So they saw a potential in, podcast studios. But, I was lucky enough to be in their town. They gave me some gear. They were like, just test this out. And then we realized slowly that, yes, we can do it. We can automate everything. And this is where we found a way to automate our first studio maybe 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Time just goes really fast. And so we automated our first studio in a co-working space. And just really simple, like the device was on the table, you press record, you press stop, And then at first, it was all me, transferring the footage, right? Because there was no automation or link made. But then we started building automation, and the whole self-serve idea of podcasting came to life.
Right. So studios, zero staff.
Zero staff.
Wow.
So people watch a video. We tell them, okay, you come in like this, you get here, the parking is there, video how to get there, video how to use the space, place the mic the right way, place yourself in the center of the table, and nothing moves, right? Like even the camera, not the camera arm, but the mic arms are specially found to work well for somebody that we don't want you to, unscrew something and things like that. And then the mic would fell down. So everything has been taught through for the automation and locked in place. So you can't really move anything, which is maybe the downside.
Yeah.
But then the upside, there's no staff, and we can upscale.
Right. And how the security works, like people can key themselves in, and how is that a challenge?
Yeah, well, it's pretty simple. We found that co-working spaces had already security in place, right? So it's in a co-working in some co-working space,
right?
Montreal, Ottawa, it's a realtor's office, but it's kind of a co-working space also. Like it's kind of the same feeling.
So you're kind of inside a hub, right?
Yeah. So we have a locked door usually with a code. So we give them the code and they get in, and that's it, right? So it is fairly simple. And then we have security cameras. I could go in on my phone and see the studio. Each camera I have access 24/7, so I can see the camera live. So that's really great on the security side, and most people pay to come in, so it is a plus,
So I'm impressed, and the reason why I'm looking forward to digging deeper into your concept and where do you see this headed is because we are, as Podster, but as Podyx as well, we are exposed to a lot of conversations with various industry people who are arguing about where is our industry headed, right? So what's happening here and how is AI impacting the industry and so on. And it's refreshing to talk to someone that has, such a great overview on the industry and sees such big potential. So I want to dig into the fact that you have plans to go bigger. You want to build more studios. You want to, have more locations. And tell me, with the automations you're doing and AI and everything, the whole idea is to actually automate 90 or 100% of the workflow. Everything's going to be automated. You then just grow your locations, the actual physical locations, and you pipe them into whatever system you've done, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. And, like right now, our automation goes all the way to the edit part. Right. After the editing, and the editing part is not automated, though there's some software out there like Adobe has a plugin called AutoPod. You might know it. It's gonna look at the audio and then switch the show for you really, really quickly. And I think Resolve has a new kind of camera switching system also that came out. So part of the the edit is not really automated yet. Right. And we still need to have someone to edit the stuff. Like, even though we want AI to take over, but it's not going to happen. Right. So we have that part. But the first part, yes, everything is piped in. Everything is automated. The sharing of content is automated. After that, the back end of it, the posting and all what the client wants is going to be still people running it. Do I see AI taking some part of that in the future, or a really good SaaS, a really good system that is being built for posting? Yes, I think that's going to come with time, right? But that's the goal, right? The goal is right now to build, 30 studios to 300. That's a big dream, right? Build a network of studios where people can go and just create content in a really fast way.
Right. And because you're so heavy on automations and you've invested a lot of time in there, curious to hear, where do you think AI plays a really big role when it comes to studios? Let's park the editing for now. I mean, of course, it's going to be a big game, but for studios, studio operations, studios running, where do you see AI playing a game there?
Yeah, so AI is interesting because I think it helps us in a way because, in a sense, people will want real content, right? AI is incredible right now, and it's growing so fast. So I see the future as, can we prove this is real content in one side?
Right.
And also, I see the broadcaster, like the big broadcaster, slowing down, as views and content, and people are going to move to their own content and their own production, and this is where podcasting is going to come in a great way. So podcast is bound to grow.
Right.
I totally believe that. I'm from Canada, and it's pretty slow in Canada, growing really fast in the U.S. It's massive. I do see that only 10% of that market that are using professional studios.
Right.
So there's a huge market there, right? There's 90% of people that are doing podcasts but not using professional studios.
Right.
So there is potential there to move, and I believe that people will want to move to studios if they want a professional show, and you want to bring the CEO of some company. You want them to be comfortable. You don't want them necessarily in your home. But back to AI, I think, AI is going to help us in a sense.
Right. And what would you say? You mentioned, you want to have that great experience for your guest. You want to make sure that whole setup is professional and not something done out of your bedroom. When you look at the current split of clients, how many of them are podcasters having a typical podcast setup, and how many are just content creators? Because every studio owner I talk to has a mix of different, like some are serving content creators, YouTubers, some are serving podcasters, some are more corporate, some are more individual. Like how do you feel about the current split?
Yeah, I think we do have content creators. Obviously, we are specifically pushing more podcast. The reason is we don't necessarily have a prompter operator, right? And that's a big thing. People want the prompter. They want to read. Yeah. We do have a setup where you can plug your laptop in. There's a screen in front of you, and you send your laptop to the screen.
Right.
But you're running your own prompter on a free prompter app. It's a little bit different, right? And sometimes it's a little bit hard to do that if you're not used to running a prompter and reading on a screen, and don't have the tech support to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So we push less for the content creator, though we have some. We have plenty. But for me, it's easy to say to someone, it's so easy. Let's create a podcast. I'm going to put this into Opus Clip or some software, and I'm going to create 30 to 60 really good clips. Right. So that's the easy way, the really fast way. And then obviously with the podcast, it's a lot more natural, right? To just talk with someone. It's the easiest thing to do in the world. Not the easiest thing, but you know what I mean? Like compared to talking to like reading a prompter. So, for us, it's 80% of podcasts that we push, because we want people to realize that podcast is powerful. You got the long form, you got the short form, like you got everything to build your brand. Right. And then obviously we're pushing corporate clients and things like that, because they're going to be, obviously corporate clients are going to pay more. And, it's sometimes better to have 10 clients than 300 clients. Right.
As you think about, that's a really good point around corporate clients, individuals, content creators. Like as you think about catering to corporates, anything that came to mind specifically? Or I know it's a big topic in the community. People are talking about, hey, corporate clients versus individuals versus podcasters versus, aspiring large YouTubers and things like that. How do you think of corporates and serving their demand? Is it like just democratizing access to high quality content and allowing them to record a large volume of content versus what most of them do now, and that's get a crew in their office, spend thousands of dollars on it, and so on?
Yeah, I think it's fast paced. It's easy access, right? To go to a studio instead of building your own studio and your own things and spending that money. You're also going to save in the long run, I think, a lot of money as a corporate. I think, they have the marketing team. They don't always have the team to, film and create content. And even if they do, they don't have 3, 4, or 5 cameras, and the mics and all the setup and the lights. So for them, it's easy to start that through a studio. And it's also like a really good idea to start a podcast. Like, I mean, the idea for the marketing team, it's huge, right? Because you're going to get constant content coming in to your pipeline, and you'll be able to use that. Right. And I think that's what they need to build, right? Like a constant show going forward, and just build a lot of content through that. And it's so easy to go to the studio
Right.
versus building your own, right? So I think, yeah.
And we talked a bit about that outside, but how do you think about selling this? Like, is it a one-off, bundles, retainers? Like, what's the goal? If you can, of course, what you're doing now, but also what you're thinking of as you're building this, about 30 more studios, you got to fill them up, right? So the question is then, how do you make it easy for these clients to transact with you?
Yeah, it's definitely for businesses, definitely a yearly bundle,
Yeah.
right? And on my side, I want to partner with a marketing team, maybe a small marketing agency
Right.
that can take on the back end of it, which is posting and marketing the podcasts, right? But it's definitely a yearly bundle for enterprise. I think that's really important, and I think it's an easy sell because, well, it depends on your price point, right?
Yep.
But I think it's between $10K to $25K per year, and for them to get all this content and all this stuff out, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we see high demand from corporate clients, a lot of smaller businesses going into creating content because they're sick of like short ads on social media and things that don't convert. Like it's good for grabbing attention, but doesn't convert, doesn't build credibility. Like there's a lot to unpack there when you talk about long form and about creating content which requires a studio versus something with your mobile phone. When we ask people why'd you come, they usually say, well, when I look at through my reel or my feed, you stop when you see something done highly professional and something that's really catching the eye versus another piece of content recorded with the phone or something that looks dodgy. So I think it's more how do you build that credibility that people actually come to you because you're focusing on high quality content. People can see that, people can notice. So it's good that you're building an infrastructure that can democratize that.
Yeah. And I think, for me, podcasting at the source, like there's two types of podcaster I see. It's like the podcast, I want to build a podcast to build an audience. But at the same time, there's this other type of podcaster, which is a great way to network. Right. If you can meet that one person in your life, it might change your life completely. Right. And that's how I see podcasting. There's a podcast in Montreal that's starting soon called To the Top. And the idea is like, okay, I invite you to my podcast and then you connect me with your top person.
Right.
And so on. Right. And I see this as just an amazing way to meet people, connect with them. Podcasting is really the way to go to grow.
Love it. Yeah. This is a great concept, and it's actually one of the ways initially Podster started because Vuk was with his own podcast. He was attracting C-suite and people that he wanted to network with, and eventually grew and became a network of studios. So it's definitely still a really big winner when it comes to why should you have a podcast. Which leads me to one thing that we always discuss almost every time there is a podcast studio owner community, coffee and cables meetup. Every time we talk about things is the future of the industry. As Podyx, we made a huge bet on the industry. And every time we talk to people, there's one thing that always is the anchor, and that's this industry is expanding, it's blowing up. It's like in a good sense, and it's it's on the rise. And I want to hear your thoughts around the future of the industry. Where do you think, is it more studios? Is it bigger studios? Is it kind of high-end Hollywood type production? Is it like, what are your thoughts on this industry and something that 150 people in the community, studio owners are thinking about?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, the industry is definitely growing. Right. That is for sure, because what's happening, like the Oscars are going on YouTube. So people are switching from broadcaster to, I want to say, podcasters. Right. It's creating, I mean, AI is kind of creating this movement also that, you watch the news, you don't even know what's real, even though it probably is, but like there's so much. It depends which country you are in, right? There's a lot of fake news out there, and I think podcast is going to come back as a place where people can bring their voice, their own show. There's this podcast in Canada. The guy from CBC left CBC because apparently he was not allowed to interview whoever he wanted on the political side, and so now he has his own show, and he's pushing that forward.
Right.
Podcasting is definitely growing. I think the growth is going to happen in the next 5 years, like a major growth. And this is why it's a great time to be in this business.
Right.
I think everybody that has a good business should have a podcast.
Right.
Right. To then you become the expert.
Right.
Right. And that's what people need to do, become the expert and get out there. I think it's hard to say where it's going to end up. Right, in 10 years.
Right.
I think there's definitely going to be a shift. Is there going to be like a podcast channel on Netflix? Right. Disney might have a podcast channel. I think it's all going to grow, and they're all going to have their own things. After that, I don't know, but I do believe that Netflix podcast is coming. Like stuff is coming.
Right.
For sure.
And then one thing that you have obviously thought of, I hope, is having 4 studios and aspiring to have 30 or 100 or you naturally have in that whole infrastructure have access to content creators who are in different parts of Canada, United States, wherever you're building the studios. So that's a lot of content creators, and in a way you're at the source where all these people are creating content, and they might come to you for their first episode and do the next 100 with you. And how do you see one thing that this community of hundreds of studios has as a core advantage, which is access to all these content creators, which not even the biggest guys have? Because if you're like a CNBC or HBO or whatever you are looking for whoever's going to be the next big guy. But the whole idea around building the network of content creators obviously brings the topic of you have access to all these people, right? So, and then how do you build on that? How do you use that for organic growth? How do you use that for as a leverage? And that's something that probably everybody thinks here.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because you guys build Podyx, right?
Yeah, correct.
And that community is something that I've thought about, right? You guys did it through owners of studios, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I met you guys and I met Podyx and the team and Boyan, and it's like I was thinking of doing this, and I was slowly going there, but a little bit late.
Yeah.
Which is fine, because you guys made exactly what I wanted to make, so it was easy to transfer to that. Now, the next step, yes, building a community of podcaster is kind of the one of the big goals, and I think this is if we have 30 studios, it's going to be really, really powerful. And I think also like on the community of videographers, right? Because videographers will have clients, and they don't always have the money to have 3-4 cameras. So it is good for them to connect with a studio, right? And to be able to offer their clients, podcasting, because it would cost too much if they went on their own, right? It would cost, $5,000, whatever. It goes really high up. But yeah, there is a powerful thing in building the community behind it. It's not done yet, but it is in the plan, right? To build a community for OnPod to become stronger. And I truly believe in this. I like competition. I think competition is really, really good.
Right.
I think more studios, the better.
Yep.
I used to be a dance teacher, and it's a side thing. Lindy hop, so swing dancing is very athletic. So not salsa or anything, but anyways. So Lindy hop teacher, and I wanted to teach in this school, and they didn't want to because I didn't learn from them and things like that. So I opened my own school, and they were really like, they weren't happy about it, right? But at the end of the day, it's like I'm growing the community of swing dancers, and they might go to your studio after, right? And it's the same thing for podcasting. More podcasters we can grow with both our marketing, will grow the community, and then we'll have more business on both sides, right? So, so I truly believe in more studios and working together, and you guys did it right, and working together and building this community.
We believe 100% in the power of the industry, and as you said, like competition. Yes, there's competition in Dubai. There's the highest number of podcasting studios per capita in the world, right? Because there's at least 50, if not more, that we know of. But we, I always go back to, there's one really powerful story that I've heard from Visa when I was working with them in my previous life. I went there to pitch them a project, and naively I thought like, hey, MasterCard must be a competition. So I started talking to them about, hey, there's, this trend in the industry, and, your competitions like MasterCard are probably thinking about this. And their chief innovation officer was saying like, our competition is not MasterCard. Our competition is cash. So we own more than 50% of the market. And if we move only a few percent of cash to digital, we benefit the most because we have the highest share. So he's like, I'd be very happy if everybody else, like MasterCard and Amex and all of these other guys, would push the whole market into digital because it benefits me the most. And I was like, it's so powerful. Like if you think of this industry, which is really nascent, like our industry is nascent, it's going to grow. There's so much legacy in our industry where you see corporates still record with large crews on site. We're not using the studio infrastructure, where you see that high quality content in many cases has not been democratized yet. What you're talking about, where multiple studios are going to produce more podcasters, are going to grow the trend, are going to fulfill the demand for more high quality content and authentic content, which you don't get with either legacy media, and you also don't get it with AI, because both are, either fake news or no news or bad news. So I think you're spot on in terms of working together as a community, and that's why we are open books. Like in the Podster Diaries, you can see in the community, we talk about everything and anything Podster, like everything, how we talk to investors, how our P&L looks like, what we focus on, where we invested money, where we made mistakes. And I think that's the power of what this community can achieve. And the last one, and then we can explore other topics. But you mentioned something interesting, like community of videographers and community of people who are from the industry. Like every time you talk about AI disrupting a certain space, there's always these threads which talk about people being displaced from their jobs, and AI replacing jobs, and automation replacing jobs. And you are the guy who, you have built Unmanned Studios. You're the guy that's displacing people on their jobs. But you mentioned something critical, which is this notion of every time you improve processes and you automate something, you create more space and more jobs for people who are in the industry, because they will not lose their job. They will change what they do and how they do it, but they will essentially remain in the industry. So I'm keen to hear, as you think of, the future and the expansion, what will be, as people go up the value chain, how does that value chain look like? Because if you have automated studios, if you have automated a lot of parts in the distribution flow, and you're probably thinking of automating parts of editing, like how does then the value chain looks like, and when you can focus your efforts on offering value to like high-end clients or corporate clients, where would that focus go?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, we're while we expand, we're obviously getting partnership with videographers in those cities, because they can come and help, repair stuff, right? And they're great connectors, right? So we are always keeping that the value of connecting with people through our business. And then at the end of the day, we'll create more jobs on the editing part, probably. I don't know if the future comes with it probably just gets faster, right? Faster, more clients. So obviously one person can edit more stuff in one day, right? So we are, in a sense, yes, cutting jobs on that front, but we're creating other jobs in different directions, I think.
On location shoots, has that crossed your mind or
not
really?
Not too much, not yet,
Yeah.
because I'm like right now I live in Bangkok, my business in Canada, so it's very hard to do that. Though I have a lot of friends that are videographers, so obviously we can do on location stuff.
Yeah.
But it's always more expensive than the studio,
Of course.
so it's always hard to get that done.
Of course. Yeah, a lot of like studios we talk to, that's why I bring in on location shoots, is because at Podstar we do on location, we do studio. Every studio owner, a lot of studio owners I talk to, they diversify, so they do on location, they do events, they do in studio.
They're usually videographers too, right?
Videographer, of course. Yeah. Videographers, and then you need producers, or you need audio engineers and so on. So that's why I'm asking, like, how do you see that value chain? How does it look like in this future? But I think you're spot on to say that AI will positively influence the industry, but it will create some level of noise that needs to be managed, and I think that's the part where studios play a big role. Because the studios offer authenticity, they offer credibility to creators, and everyone can create anything nowadays. Like when I was at one of the panels a couple of weeks ago, someone said, "Well, if I could take a notebook LLM now, and I can just script my podcast, and it will completely generate my whole podcast." Like, what's the point of studios? And these are the kind of questions you'd get from people who don't understand the industry and who are thinking of everything can be replaced by AI. So what's what's your moat in a way? Like if I could ask, if I'm your potential investor and I ask you what's your moat, how would you respond if I can compare you to a notebook LLM?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And at the end of the day, people, certainly after COVID, people want to meet people. Right? They don't want just everything created with AI. They want to connect with people. And that's what podcast does, and that's what Podstar does, right? You come in and you meet a person. So I think that's really kind of important, right? And people, like, yes, you can create it with AI, but it's not authentic, right? And there's something that I want to build or create in a sense, and it's basically a kind of this code that's gonna say that this is real content. So whatever comes out of OnPod is real, and we can prove it. So I see that in the future, and I think some camera companies are working on that that idea. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, of course. That's exactly what and what I like about you sharing ideas with us, and you're active in the community. And I think people who are openly discussing and sharing ideas effectively end up executing a lot more versus people who are like, someone's going to steal my idea, or I know something other people don't, which I think ideas are a kind of dime a dozen, and a lot of people throw ideas everywhere, and execution, fails, or there's no execution. So I think in our industry specifically, there's so much room for growth and so much room for expansion that even things like partnerships or collabs or things where people can come together to achieve some big impact is possible, because it's not a highly saturated industry which works on super tight margins where shark eats shark. I think it's something which actually an industry where you want to be. And I'm glad that there's innovators who think like you and are open to try these concepts, who they might change the way we think about the future of studios. So thanks for being with me on the show, and for participating really actively in the community. Really value the mindset and the thinking, and looking forward to see you. I really root for you and cheer for you to hit 30 across
2 years
in 2 years.
That's our goal.
Well, let's do everything we can to help and grow that, because I'm sure it's going to impact the industry in a good way, and it's going to help everyone see how this kind of concept can grow, get maybe some ideas, or try them in different markets in Europe or somewhere else, and of course maybe you find partners along the way.
Yeah, and thanks for building Podster, Podyx. All these things are just amazing, and to see the growth in the community, it's gold, right?
Thank you. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming to Singapore. Thanks for coming to Podster, and I'm sure we'll see each other around the world many more times.
For sure.